nature of a substitute, which makes the following changes to H.R. 3114 as introduced. It replaces "of 2021" with "of 2022" in the title. It extends the coverage period by 1 year until January 27th, 2024, and adjusts the dates to reflect the passage of time since the bill was introduced. I introduced this bill along with Chairman Scott in May of 2021 to ensure that maritime workers receive a work-related presumption under the Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act if they contract COVID-19 or are required to quarantine. During this once-in-a-century pandemic, maritime workers have been on the front lines among the nation's essential workers. Maritime workers working elbow to elbow load and unload ships and barges, toil in shipyards, and work deep inside the compartments and holds of ships with co-workers to perform repairs and maintenance. Their work is at the heart of our critical supply chains and our defense infrastructure. Since they work on and around navigatable waters of the United States, they are covered by the Federal Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act. Instead of state workers' compensation laws, this bill creates a conclusive presumption that maritime workers contracted COVID-19 as a work-related illness. If their duties require contact with coworkers, the public, or others as part of the job, and who are diagnosed with COVID-19 within an established time frame following exposure, to the extent that the employee experiences an unreimbursed loss. The Longshore Act provides payment of medical benefits, lost wages, or survivor benefits.
This is the one before yours, so I think
Longshore workers often work in pairs side by side. The same is true for those workers who load and unload break bulk, and grain cargo from ships and barges. Workers handling break bulk cargo often spend hours in holds of vessels and in trucks as they transfer cargo. This work is physically demanding, often requiring multiple workers to handle loose cargo, which places workers at a heightened risk of exposure to COVID-19. States have taken the lead in adjusting this evidentiary requirement for workers to establish causation for COVID-19 under their state's workers' compensation laws, because it is nearly impossible for a claimant to prove the precise mode of exposure to the virus. 18 states have adopted presumptions that apply to the range of essential workers, which allows them to establish causation without having to overcome the insurmountable burdens of proof for work-relatedness that normally apply. Congress applied this principle to over 2 million federal civilian employees covered under the Federal Employees Compensation Act by enacting COVID-19 protections as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. It is time we follow suit for our maritime workers as well. Under that presumption established for the federal workers, the Department of Labor have accepted 86% of COVID claims. In contrast, out of 1,093 Longshore COVID claims submitted between April 20th and October 2021, employers paid or settled 7% of claims, while disputing the remaining 93% of claims. As Greg Reagan, president of the AFL-CIO Transportation Trades Department, put it, for the many who have been infected by COVID-19 on the job, receiving workers' compensation benefits has been difficult, if not impossible. This bill reimburses the employers or their insurers for the cost of claims covered by this legislation, provided employers have abided by basic safety standards needed to keep their workers safe. Similar legislation providing COVID-19 presumptions for maritime workers passed in the House 3 times in the past 2 years, including in May 2020 and in September 2020 in the 2 HEROES Acts, and in the 117th Congress, this committee reported and the House passed a similar provision in the American Rescue Plan Act. Unfortunately, that provision was removed by the Senate under the Rules for Reconciliation legislation. Finally, I would like to thank the United Steelworkers, the International Longshoremen's Association, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, and the Metal Trades and Transportation Trades Department in the AFL-CIO for their tireless work to ensure that all maritime workers receive the protection they need and deserve. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this ANS and yes on the underlying bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.